very special guest on Hello Darling is Professor Helen Milroy. Helen is the first female Indigenous doctor, a mother, published author. She is descendant of Perku people from the Pilbara region of Western Australia. Helen was the recipient of the Indigenous Doctor of the Year Award in 2018 and was named the Western Australian of the Year in 2021. She's a pioneer in applying Indigenous beliefs and cultural practices in mental health support for Indigenous people, particularly children. Helen is a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist and board member of Beyond Blue and many other committees and boards. She was also appointed as the Commissioner of AFL. Professor Milroy was awarded the 2022 Momentum Most Inspiring Woman of the Year Award for helping make our world a better place and leaving footprints for generations to come. Hello, darling. Welcome to my show.
Hello, darling.
Helen, thank you for finding the time for being here today. You are the woman who does it all.
Thank you.
Are you a woman who has it all?
Oh, I don't think anyone ever has it all. There's always things that you want to do or achieve or make better.
Yes. And what's happiness to you?
Happiness, I think, is that sort of sense of having some joy in the world, feeling like you are comfortable in your own skin and your place, I guess, in the world, knowing also that you have those kind of connections around you that keep you strong and grounded. So I guess it's a lot of things, happiness, but it's also, I guess, a state as well, isn't it? That you can feel happy because you're pleased and confident about all of the things that you're doing.
Helen, how did it feel for you and your family to become the first female Indigenous doctor?
Oh, look, my grandmother was very, very proud. She was just a beautiful Aboriginal woman. She's the most sweetest, generous, kind woman you could ever hope to meet. And we used to spend a lot of time together, actually, when I was growing up. She sort of looked after me because Mum had to work a lot, you know, to make sure the family was okay. And, you know, we often talked about things in the sort of backyard. That's where my love of backyards came from. But she often had healing ways as well. So when she found out that, you know, I was going to go to medical school and become a doctor, she was so excited, just so excited about it, as was Mum, and the rest of the family were proud as well.
And being the first female Indigenous doctor during your study, did you have to work harder because you were Indigenous?
Not really. Look, I didn't know that I was the only, you know, Aboriginal person to have done medicine at the time. I was just determined to be a doctor. That's what I thought I wanted to do. I wanted to help people and make sure that people could live long and happy lives. It was only much, much later on when we tried to get all of the Aboriginal doctors around Australia, and Torres Strait Islanders as well, together to find out how many of us there were, that I realised that I was the first one to have graduated.
Incredible. And did you ever experience boys' club syndrome?
Oh yes, look, I think medicine in the very early days was quite male-dominated. Fortunately, when I did medicine, there were a lot of women in the course. It was probably close to 50%, so that was good. And things were changing, but, you know, there's always a long way to go.
Incredible. Helen, thank you. Now, you specialize in, obviously, mental health with emphasis on children.
Yes.
What made you decide to go into this direction?
So when I was a medical student, I really enjoyed hearing about people's lives and their stories. I think that people have the most amazing stories to tell, and when you're a medical student and a doctor, you're in a very privileged position to actually hear those stories. There's a lot of trust. So it's a wonderful experience, and it is a privilege to be able to listen to those stories. So I think I had a natural inclination for really wanting to know more about people's lives and the things that happened to them and how they coped. I also really enjoyed paediatrics as a medical student. You know, I just thought kids were great and they keep you honest. And I think when you sort of can see a child smile again when they've been unwell, that's just a lovely reward. So I think there was that sort of natural tendency to go in that direction. once I finished medicine, I worked for a few years, as you do. You know, you have to do your intern year and your residency. And then I had my first child, so I ended up going into general practice because it was easy to train part-time as a mum. And I really enjoyed general practice because you got to meet lots of families and you heard about lots of people's lives. So it was good. But I found that the mental health needs of the families were quite strong and difficult to meet as a general practitioner. I didn't feel like I had the right knowledge or expertise.
And when did you discover your talent to write books and to illustrate them as well?
Yeah.
When did you know you love to do it and you can?
Well, when you grow up in an Aboriginal family, you actually listen to stories right from birth, really, and you're always drawing and doing things. You know, sort of. I can remember we had an old paperbark tree down the back of the house, down the back of the yard, and sometimes we'd strip pieces of the paperbark off and flatten it out, and we'd draw pictures on it with my nana. And that was probably some of the earliest drawings we ever did. And of course, then the storytelling was just part of life growing up. My grandmother and my mother always told lots and lots of stories. So I think it was probably just a way of life. And then as I got older, I mean, I'd always drawn little things and written a few stories and things like that. But then as I got older and started thinking about what children were missing out on, having worked for decades in mental health with very distressed children and families, I thought this is a way of influencing a whole population of children.
Yes.
By having books where children feel connected back to nature, they feel, you know, I think they find their own sense of place and purpose. And so I wanted to bring that really for kids so that they could feel positive about themselves and positive about their place in the world.
Beautiful. So that was actually my next question I was thinking to give you. What's your main message in the books? What's the aim of them?
So some of the aims, there are obviously different types of stories that I've written. The first series I wrote was a series of, that was Wombat and Mudlark. They're a series of sort of children's kind of personalities, but they're represented through animal characters, a bird or a dingo. And it's about a child being able to recognise those really positive qualities and feel proud of that. And then also the animals have a special connection somewhere within the universe to this. They can dance with the stars or sing to the moon or sing to the sun. And so it's a way of helping children to get a positive sense of who they are, positive connection to the broader world around them, and really to instill hope, which is what most stories are really about. Some of the other stories, like the Backyard series, I wrote them during, of course, the COVID pandemic because we were all experiencing isolation in lockdown and people were sort of feeling, I think, that the whole world was shrinking. So when you think like that, you start to feel anxious and worried. So I wrote the Backyard series to actually make the world feel bigger by being able to focus on the backyard and who's around you and how you look after all of the creatures that live around you, our beautiful birds that come and visit us every day, all the little bugs and insects that creep and crawl around the backyard, maybe some other animals that live around us like dogs and cats and turtles and all sorts of other things. So it was about giving children time out from the worry of COVID and parents and to focus on something really positive that they could do about having those broader relationships with nature.
Beautiful.
We look after nature and nature looks after us.
Beautiful. Helen, thank you. So, am I right in saying that Indigenous culture and tradition, being the oldest in the world, has
that's right.
incredibly, I don't know how many people know it, but it's incredible, the oldest in the world.
It's the oldest knowledge system in the world and the oldest living culture.
How beautiful. Now, there's an incredibly strong connection to spirituality.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories you could share about your own spiritual experience?
Yeah, so in some of the belief systems for First Nations people, and particularly say in my group, which is Palku, and our group's from the Pilbara region in Western Australia, so up north, so around Marble Bar down to Nullagine, and that's kind of where my grandmother's country is, so that's the ancestral homelands up there. And when you go back to your homelands, you're standing on the thousands and thousands of years of ancestry. Like the sense of profound and deep connection that you get when you stand there on the land of your ancestors, it's almost beyond words. It's an almost indescribable feeling, but it's so profound, this sense of connection that you get, that I believe that's kind of a spiritual form of relationship. And you know, every time you go back there, you get that sense of renewal again. And that's what Aboriginal people talk about. When they move away from country, they feel a grief, you know, that they're leaving their family. And then when they go back and they reconnect with that land and that country and that ancestry, they feel connected and strong again. And that's, I think, part of our well-being ongoing, is that sense of connection that we have, that deep relationship that we have with our ancestry and with the land on which we were born and the place where we should be.
So when you went back, how long was the time of separation when you went back first time?
For the first time, I was an adult, because I was born in Perth and I grew up in Perth. And the first time I went back, I was an adult, and it was probably one of the most profound experiences of my life.
Incredible.
That reconnection back to all of my sort of ancestral homes and ancestors was just, and you know, it's a feeling that I kind of still have today. Like it almost makes me feel quite emotional just even thinking about that. But it's something that you then carry with you. The other thing that happens, I guess, in a belief system, in a cultural belief system, is what happens, you know, after death.
Yes.
And so in our family, we sort of believe that people might come back in animal form or spirit form and visit you. I wear sometimes this little crow pendant because that reminds me of my grandmother. That was her totem, to be a crow. And so when I have this with me, I feel close to her. And I don't feel that sense of loss quite as much as when she did pass on. So I think there's a way also of having belief systems that help you stay connected and still feel like the people that you loved are still with you in some way or some form.
And do you believe in dreams?
I do, yes.
Can you share any special dream story that you experienced in your own dream?
So sometimes when I have wanted to work out something, I think you can use the dream space. So I'll give you an example of what happened to me. When I finished my training in psychiatry, I was dissatisfied that a lot of the stuff that comes from a cultural perspective was just not included in any of our teaching and learning. And I remember thinking, well, you know, how am I supposed to understand how to work with my mob if it's not really taught, you know?
Yes.
And there were differences in the way people experience distress and how they talk about it and what it means to them, as there is across many, many different cultural groups, but particularly so for our First Nations people living here in Australia. So I went back and I recast everything through a cultural lens. How would this look from a cultural perspective? How do we understand health and healing and emotion and distress? And how do we understand sort of recovery and all those sorts of concepts? So I sort of went back and I thought, well, they need to be represented through imagery and through narrative and story. So that's what I did. So I bought paints and canvases, and I started painting everything through a cultural lens. There was a particular concept that I found really difficult to get to, and this was, what does trauma look like? You know, if we looked at it from a sort of visual perspective, what does it look like? What sort of story do we need to tell? And I think images have their own storytelling, don't they?
Of course.
You know, we can tell a story in language, but we can also tell a story through images.
Of course.
Absolutely. And people will read that, won't they? So I just couldn't get the image. And I thought, I know this topic really, really well. You know, I've got so much knowledge about this, and I just couldn't get the image. And I remember saying to my mum, I'm really struggling with this one. And she said, oh, you're just trying too hard. You have to relax and just, creativity comes, you know, you just got to let it come. It's like a gift, you know, that you get given. So I tried to relax and I fell asleep. And while I was asleep, I had this amazing dream where I was walking along a path and I came to some of my ancestors on this path. And they said, what is it that you want to know? And I said, I want to know what trauma looks like. And they said, well, we will help you, follow us. And so I followed them and we kind of walked for some distance. And then we came to the edge of the world. It was like this kind of edge that you couldn't see, but it was there. And they said, you will need to ask the rainbow serpent. And so this kind of door opened up and there was just complete blackness. You could not see anything, just absolute blackness. And this voice said, what do you want to know? And I said, I want to know what trauma looks like. And this voice came back and said, it's not an image, it's a story. Come and I will show you. So I walked into this blackness and hopped on the rainbow serpent's back, and we just flew through this darkness. And and it felt like it was a long, long time, but you know, in dreamland, you don't really know how long it is. And I was taken on this long journey, and this voice was talking to me and telling me what it all meant. And then we started to come to this light, and it was the dawning of a new day. And that was also part of the story, that sometimes people feel trapped in darkness when they've had a lot of trauma. But we do have to be able to shed light on these wounds, and we do have to be able to move forward into the dawning of a new day. And then at the end of all of that journey and story and dreaming, I woke up and I had this image. The image of the story was there, and I painted it.
And what was the image?
Yeah, so it was part of the journey. So coming from the darkness into the light.
Yes.
Being held when you need to be held until you can walk again. And then the dawning of the new day to shed light on those wounds and allow us to heal and move forward in life.
What a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing.
So I got the image and I got the story.
Wow. and I got goosebumps. Helen, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, talking about trauma,
Yeah.
because you specialize in trauma recovery, especially in children.
Yeah.
You were commissioner at the Royal Commission.
That's right, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the experience?
Yeah. Look, it was a real honour to do that work. It was a privilege to hear the stories, and I do thank everyone that came forward with such courage and sometimes at great personal cost to tell us their stories. And of course it was, you know, profoundly disturbing, but at the same time it was also very inspiring to hear, you know, people's survival, how they move forward in life, and also just the desire for this never to happen to anyone else. That was such a strong message from a lot of people that came and spoke to us, that we've got to do much, much better in protecting children and making sure that these things never happen again. So I think that from a public awareness perspective, we were able to show that these things do happen, that there's a real need to be able to protect children, and also then to have services available for people to be able to then recover and move forward.
So if you were to verbalize in one word or one sentence, what would be the most positive outcome of Royal Commission?
I think that it allowed people to have their stories heard. You know, it's really, really important to bear witness to things that have happened. And I think that was a really important part.
Do you think Royal Commission should come together in certain periods of time again and again?
Possibly, and obviously we have Royal Commissions for different things, but the focus is always on allowing the truth to come to the surface.
Yes, I understand. Now, being exposed to such a strong working subject and topics, how do you protect your own or balance your own mental health and well-being?
Yes. Well, of course, none of us are immune to stress, and if you work in mental health, you can become very distressed with what you're hearing, and also just, you know, sometimes it's really difficult to find the services and the help that people need, and so working in mental health can be really, really hard work. And you do need to have that self-care, because if you don't have that self-care, then how can you help others? You know, you've got to stay strong and resilient. And I think, you know, one of the biggest things that I probably did apart from getting like supervision and support and all of those normal things that we all do, I think having that creative world for me was a really, really important way to stay healthy. Because if you don't have an alternative world to go to, then the world can feel like a pretty dark place.
That's right.
And I think if you get trapped there, then that's not very good for your mental health. It can take you down.
Do you meditate?
I don't really meditate as such, but I do like sitting in the backyard and letting go. You know, and I suppose that's
your
the
meditation.
Yeah, that's my
Yes.
meditation.
Yes.
Listening to the universe in the garden. So I think having that creative outlet allowed me to really create a different world that I could have control over.
Yes.
You could create all these things that happened and positive relationships. So Bush Mob was a series of stories that I wrote. Willy Willy Wagtail was the first one. Was a series I started writing during the commission to allow me to sort of think about the world differently and have a positive. And so by the time I sort of got back home, I'd already been in this other world that was positive and that I had some control over. And that was a way of sort of trying to keep a balance.
Helen, how early is not too early to start educating children about the dangers of abuse and to point what's wrong, what's right? How early would you say it's not too early?
I think you can build it up from very early life. So babies need to know their mother's around and is a safe person, and their parents and their family systems, that people around them will tend to their needs. That all helps children start to understand the world, even from being an infant. And then I think the messaging always has to be about children being able to make good judgments and know right from wrong and understand what to do and have strategies for sort of getting out of situations. That can all be built in over time. It's got to be developmentally appropriate, obviously. You can't give too much information to a young child. They're not going to understand it. It needs to be done also in a positive way. The last thing we want to do is make children scared of everything.
That's my point.
That's not a healthy way.
That's my point. Where is the
balance?
The balance. Where is the blurred lines?
So I think one of the things that is really important for parents to be able to do is to make sure that the child knows they can speak to them about anything. You know, that's what you really want, isn't it? You want the child to be able to come to you and know that whatever it is that they're worried about, even if it's the tiniest thing, that you will help them with it. Because sometimes children test the water with a tiny thing first and see the reaction before they tell you the difficult thing. So being responsive as a parent, being able to speak to your children and listen to them without dismissing things is really important, I think.
Helen, when you were a child, who was your role model? Did you have role models?
Look, I'd probably have to say my biggest role model was my grandmother. She was just such a beautiful soul, and I've often reflected back about her influence, I guess, on my life, and she was just gentle and sweet, and I always felt safe with her. And I think that's what every child needs, don't they?
Yes.
If you have someone that you feel safe with, then the world's kind of okay.
She was your constant.
She was my constant.
Yes.
And I could go to her, and I always knew that maybe that's the role grandparents play, isn't it? That unconditional love. She never told me off. Maybe I need to tell you, I don't know, perhaps we all do.
Yes.
She was my sort of constant source of sort of love and support and feelings of safety. So whenever I was with Nan, the world made sense when I was a kid growing up. And I suspect that a lot of our children today that perhaps don't have grandparents around or don't have extended family, they have less of that sense of safety around them.
That's right. We could talk about it forever. Helen, you just came back from grand finals. Did you meet Robbie Williams?
I didn't, but I thought he was pretty good.
So did he entertain you?
He did, yeah. I thought it was a great show. And I think the whole stadium just enjoyed it. You know, there was a lot of loud singing and cheering and the like. So yeah, I thought it was a fantastic show.
Beautiful. And may I ask you, how many more books are you planning? When is your next book coming out?
Okay, so I've got a book that's just come out called Bush Mob Counting. It's a little picture book for little kids, you know, to learn to count, and you know, different times of day and different animals. So that's just been released. I've also got another book just released as well called Owl and Star, which is for all of those people that love gazing at the stars, and it's about a little owl who loves the stars, and he knows where they all are in the universe. And one night he comes out on his branch and his favourite little star isn't there. She hasn't shown herself. So he has to then go on a journey to find the little star and help her to get back into the heavens. So that's a sweet little
I'm not going to ask about the end because
no,
I don't want you to spoil it for our viewers.
You have to go and read it.
Yes.
And so I've got about another, I don't know, I've probably got about another 20 or 30 stories still there.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Helen, As a tradition, I give my guests at the end of my show a magic wand. You're already creating so much magic, but now I give you a magic wand and you have two wishes, one for yourself and one for the world. What would be your wish for yourself first?
Okay. So I guess the wish for myself would probably be that I get to see my grandchildren grow and prosper, and that I somehow am able to help bring about their well-being in life. Yeah.
And for the world?
For the world, I'd really like to see the world focus more on the well-being of children. If you think about it, our nations don't exist without the kids, because they grow into the adults and then they lead the nations. So if we actually focused on investing far more into our children and bring about their well-being and enhance their chances in life, then the world would be a safe place.
Helen, thank you so much. Thanks for making so much, creating so much magic in this world. Thank you for being here today, and I'm looking forward to all the books coming, and I'm going to look for the star. Yes?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.